Just 8 miles north of the manicured lawns of Lake Houston is a neighborhood a world away. A community defined by minimal infrastructure, a distinct lack of building codes and deed restrictions, a place where you can build, live, and open a business in just about whatever you want. This may not be what you picture when you think of the Houston suburbs, but it's been estimated over 50,000 people live here, and it's one of the fastest growing communities in the state. In just over 10 years, a Texas developer has turned tens of thousands of acres of timber farm into a massive and controversial exurb, sprawling out for miles into the East Texas forest. But there is more to the story of Colony Ridge than that. A story that would involve a pro boxer turned real estate developer, a legendary investigative journalist, a political football catching national attention, and thousands of residents caught in the crossfire. This is the story of Colony Ridge. On the periphery of the Houston metropolitan area, some 40 miles from downtown, is a string of developments that are changing the face of rural Liberty County. I'm calling it Colony Ridge, but it's actually 6 different adjacent subdivisions, all developed in affiliation with the Colony Ridge name, a development company started by pro boxer turned real estate developer Trey Harris. Harris is a native of Montgomery County and was once best known as a middleweight boxing champion, and his family has been developing land in the Houston metro area for decades. And it happened fast. In just over a decade, Colony Ridge has gone from uninhabited timber forest to the largest community in the county, with over 5 times the population of the county seat of Liberty. But nearly as soon as the subdivisions began construction, so did the controversy. The face of Colony Ridge to buyers is called Torinos Houston, the marketing and sales office of the company's developments. For years, they operated out of this yellow metal building east of New Caney, but recently completed a newer office by the Grand Parkway. Although their promotional material focuses on land deals and new businesses and schools opening, complainants tell tales of aggressive marketing, inadequate drainage and infrastructure, and predatory financing. Colony Ridge owner finances the lots here with no credit or social security check and just $500 down. The catch? Even when national interest rates were below 3%, Colony Ridge was charging north of 12%, and the foreclosure rate here is nearly 50 times the national average, accounting for over 90% of the foreclosures in Liberty County. This, and the fact that the ads and marketing were nearly entirely in Spanish, led critics to claim that Colony Ridge was targeting illegal immigrants, a claim that Harris has aggressively denied. If you buy a lot in most of Colony Ridge, you're free to do just about whatever you want with it. If you want a house, you can bring in a mobile home or an RV in any condition, or build something yourself. There's no city permits required or an HOA mandating what you can do. I have to say, Colony Ridge is one of the strangest places I've ever been. You can't underestimate the scale. From where I'm sitting, it goes for miles in every direction. And the infrastructure is bare bones. Concrete roads, no striping, no curbs for the most part, and not a single stoplight in the entire community. The term colonia in this context was coined to describe communities in the U.S. along the Mexican border, usually in unincorporated places with lapsed or non-existent deed restrictions. They often lacked vital infrastructure like water and sewer, and with no permitting authority overseeing them, allowed haphazard and unregulated construction. The concept is recognized and researched by universities and even the Department of Housing and Urban Development. But the idea of a new purpose-built community like this is extremely atypical. The first activism against Colony Ridge came from the small adjacent town of Plum Grove. Until the recent completion of the Grand Parkway, just one 2-lane road served the entirety of Colony Ridge's Houston El Norte developments, and life in Plum Grove was changing rapidly. The residents of the town cited traffic, inadequate detention and mismanaged storm runoff, and a huge burden on the Cleveland school system. The city hired the office of legendary local investigative reporter Wayne Dolcefino to bring light to the problems of Colony Ridge, focused on traffic, flooding, and crime. His office did a multi-part series on the developments and their drama with Plum Grove that I recommend checking out. Perhaps expectedly, the expose resulted in several lawsuits filed by Harris against Plum Grove and members of its city council, claiming a smear campaign against him. There was also Torinos Houston Demanda, an organization started by former residents who felt scammed by the development. They gather complaints from buyers and articles on the issues surrounding Colony Ridge and remain one of the most enduring groups fighting the development. It should be noted Colony Ridge has been cited by the Texas Department of Environmental Quality for both inadequate erosion controls during construction and operating without a permit. And the impact on Cleveland ISD has been substantial. Since Colony Ridge started development here, enrollment has grown by over 200%, with district officials attributing the vast majority of that to the company's neighborhoods. Between 2015 and 2019, Cleveland ISD undertook $300 million in bonds for the construction of new schools on land Colony Ridge had donated. While voters were initially eager to pass bonds to build new schools, more recently they have been in a stalemate, with longtime residents aggressively defeating new bond measures they say benefit a development that has caused harm to the once rural area. But despite the critics, Colony Ridge is booming. Cars fill the parking lot of Toronto's Houston on weekends. Mobile home sellers have strategically positioned themselves right outside of the community, and businesses have followed the massive influx in population. Among the haphazard homes, you see more traditional site-built homes that wouldn't be out of place in any other Houston suburb. Dallas-based Camden Homes has built tract homes both for sale and rent here that may as well be in Katy or Cypress. This is one of the major commercial streets through Colony Ridge. It's a mix of dollar stores, gas stations, roadside businesses, people selling things out of tents and trucks. Oddly enough, I do see people walking here. I saw that several times in the community, but there's no sidewalks. The only sidewalk I saw was in front of a school. I started following Colony Ridge about 3 years ago, and at that time there were a few articles about it and a series of videos from Dulcifino Consulting. But in 2023, Colony Ridge caught the attention of national conservative media. Fox News did a report on the community and a segment focused on border crossings. Later, commentator Ben Shapiro picked it up on his radio show. Some of the rumors circulating about Colony Ridge were patently false. That it was run by the cartel, that it was a no-go zone for police, that people were being shipped directly from Mexico and South America to live here. But the ball had started rolling. By this time, Colony Ridge was being run by Trey Harris's brother John, who would cover the media spots representing the community. Governor Greg Abbott promised a special legislative session aimed at stopping the growth of colonias like this in Texas, although nothing really came of it. Ironically, Trey Harris has donated over $1.6 million to Greg Abbott's campaigns over the last few years. Perhaps even more ironically, officials of the solidly red Liberty County had asked the state a decade earlier for more power to control the quality of development happening after Colony Ridge started, only to be ignored. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued Colony Ridge over false sales, marketing, and lending practices earlier this year, describing the development as a, quote, foreclosure mill targeting foreign-born residents with a limited understanding of English. And although the fervor over Colony Ridge was heavily right-wing and started with a focus on immigration, the Department of Justice also sued the developer in 2023, citing similar concerns as the Paxton lawsuit. While Colony Ridge's marketing was nearly entirely in Spanish, the legal documents were all in English, and the one-year default rate on a lot financed through Colony Ridge hovers around 30%. But there is another side to Colony Ridge, and one that the Harris brothers have repeated extensively. This is a place where if you want to own land and you don't have a lot of options, you can lay your stake in the American dream. If you want the freedom to buy land and do whatever you want, this may be the place for you. And even Glenn Beck noted that most of the residents seem to be happy here, and despite the apparent poverty and chaos, at no point in my exploration did it feel unsafe. And so for now, Colony Ridge continues to develop land by the square mile in Liberty County. They have made some concessions. They agreed to put in some deed restrictions on newer parts of the development, and claimed to be committed to stopping a practice of deed in lieu of foreclosure, which allowed defaulting residents to avoid court process if they would return the title to the developer. I will link to some of the articles and videos that have been done on the community in the years since I've been following it. An in-depth recent investigation came from Glenn Beck, and although it certainly has a political angle, it does include interviews with residents, the developer, and the founders of Toronto's Houston Demanda. The future of this place intrigues me. Will the rundown trailers give way to typical suburbia? Will the quickly built infrastructure crumble under an ever-growing population? Will it continue to be the growing, chaotic, haphazard place it seems to have become? So whether it's an affront to rural Texas life or just the next iteration of the American dream, it seems Colony Ridge is here to stay. Scott Daly here. Thanks for joining me on my exploration of Colony Ridge. Subscribe to the channel and come with me on the next adventure.